Sometimes what you say is vitally important, and sometimes what you say is critically important, and those are not exactly the same. But the truth in leadership still demands the truth. What I mean by that is there are a lot of people who communicate, and through the magnitude of their communication, through their infinite verbosity, they can overwhelm you with details that, whether they're true or not, may be indiscernible. I listened to a man the other day give a list of emotional, a set of feelings that it described a moment that they had been in, that he and his family had been through. And as he went through this moment, he wanted to enhance that moment. And by enhancing that moment, he would add extra words. It was anxiety, and by the time he got to the end of 4 or 5 words, he threw in the word exacerbation, frustration, and tiresome, and exacerbation. And I thought exacerbation is really more of a verb than it is an emotion, but I get what you're saying. And it just makes me wonder if you've run out of things to say, so you just insert words that are big enough that most people don't know what they mean. If that's a tactic in your leadership, that's one of the things I want to talk about today on leading leaders. Don't stop that blinking stuff. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. It is fascinating to me to meet people who have this desire to communicate, not because they're really trying to get a point across to you. They're not trying to persuade you, to convince you, to console you, or even to bring you to a place of greater understanding. They're communicating because they want to say something that makes them sound important. Now, maybe you've never met anybody like that. There's actually a word for it, believe it or not. And when you think about that leader who has a lot to say, maybe they preface everything with, well, I heard this from so-and-so, or I heard this from, I read this in this book. Now, there's a difference between what I would consider qualifying what you have to say, because you want to be authentic and resourceful, not just making stuff up, and putting that in such a way that you are claiming their authority. In fact, Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about the idea of trying to own or carry the ownership of a concept that you haven't actually lived out, you've just studied or read. It's not really something that you know intimately, it's just something that kind of has passed through your knowledge base. In fact, in his book, 12 Rules for Life, he talks about the idea of making sure that you do your best to tell the truth, or at least not lie. Now, this process of over-communicating, over-information, that's a little different process, because it's really about, if I flood you with enough words, then you're so busy sorting through all the words that I said that you really don't have a chance to criticize the meaning. In fact, I heard another news reporter the other day listening to the current press secretary when asked a question that she really didn't want to answer. She said a lot of stuff that had nothing to do with the question. I mean, it was all around the same topic, but it was in no way answering the question. And a commentator said that is a beautiful word salad. Meaning there's a whole lot of substance there, but it's not the meat of the answer. I thought that was a great illustration. It's a good word picture to describe this idea of throwing a lot of words at something that is not effective communication. Now, some of you who would love nothing more than just to criticize might say that this particular talk is just a bunch of words that don't really say anything. And to you, I would say you need to spend more time studying the word pedantic, because it probably describes the way you look at life. I like to take complicated things and boil them down to the simplest that I can, because a lot of the teaching and training that I do for free is designed for young people 18 to 35 years old. Most of them don't have their master's and doctorate's degrees, so I don't generally speak in a lot of big words, but I do tackle some bigger ideas and try to boil them down into a very simple way of looking at life, because I'm a very simple person. But I also know that there are a lot of people who would say, well, you could have used this one word to say all of that. I could have. That might have been, for my audience, a bit pedantic, though. Again, look it up. I want you to know, though, that as a leader, part of your role is communicating. One of the biggest issues that we see in our society today, whether you're talking about social media or mass media, or just inter-office communication media, or standing around the coffee shop or the water cooler kind of conversation, is this really tricky little word called misinformation. Misinformation. Now, in the past, misinformation was really simple. It meant, here's the truth, and here's information that we really kind of want to divert you away from the truth. That meaning hasn't changed, but the use of the label has. And so what has happened is that people who understand what misinformation really is have taken about the business of using it. But they don't use it to point you back to the truth. They use misinformation by labeling the truth as misinformation so that you will be distracted from the truth. Trust me, when someone goes to the lengths that are necessary to run a narrative, for lack of a better term, to talk about all of the pretense leading up to what should be the truth, in order to point you in a direction that doesn't look like the truth, they have another agenda. And chances are they've been working on this for a minute. There are a lot of people in various levels of leadership. And I mean, from the company guys that you work with, all the way up to the highest levels of leadership in the land, who have an agenda, and they're willing to lie about that agenda because they know if you know the agenda, you wouldn't like it. If you were in on it, if you understood what they were up to, you might be a little bit ticked and take away their power. So how do they get you to go along with their agenda without letting you in on the agenda, because that would tick you off? Well, what they do is they find everybody else who has a counter agenda, everyone who might oppose their agenda, and everyone who might resist their agenda, and they label them as everything from terrorist to supremacist to misinformation. In fact, recently there was a guy released from prison who, in another country, had spoken out against the government. He had all the facts, all the documents, everything in his hand. He was sentenced to 11 years hard labor for telling the truth about something. There are people right now in jail because they exposed the CIA for criminal activity. But all of the people that they exposed never got in trouble. The only person charged with the crime that was exposed was the person who exposed it. Well, they only knew about it because they were a first-hand party in doing it. But when they exposed it, rather than breaking the back of the problem or bringing down the other people involved in it, the only person prosecuted for it was the one who was the whistleblower. That is not the way the system is designed to work. No, it's supposed to be that when you tell the truth sets you free. But in today's society, there is a whole lot of intentional miscommunication at various levels of leadership for the purpose of promoting an agenda that may or may not be in the best interest of the organization or the public, but of one or two elite people. Here's my challenge to you. As a leader, I challenge you to be above that. I challenge you to tell the truth even when it costs you. That's what integrity means. You do the right thing even when nobody's looking. You do the right thing even when it's going to come at high cost or personal risk for you. You do the right thing. You tell the truth. That's integrity. That's hard to come by these days, kind of like work ethic. But if you're going to communicate as a leader, do your homework first. Make sure that you understand all of the aspects of the information that's out there, because I promise you, if the context of what you're talking about has any merit whatsoever to be world-changing information, or even business-changing information, or even innovative information as far as your technology is concerned, of your R&D, of your marketing plan, if the information that you're about to share has any critical value at all, then there's going to be somebody who's countering your narrative, countering what is the truth for their own agenda. It just has to be that way. There will always be truth and counter-truth. There will always be information and misinformation. And that misinformation sometimes comes disguised well by the authorities. There are those today who will tell you that science says this, then they will hold on to that with everything they've got, partially because they have a financial vested interest in you believing and acting as if this is true. And they will pull out all the stops. They will prosecute, they will arrest, they will fire, they will silence anyone who counters this narrative, because this narrative means money. And then there's actual truth, where people would say, I can scientifically prove this. There's enough experience behind this. We have the data. We've been researching this for years. But if that information is counter to the profitable information, it will be shut down. You as a leader need to be astute enough to dig into the truth, dig into the merits of the facts in the case, and ask about the motives. And when all else fails, when there are two sources of information that both seem like they should be, could be, would be viable sources of information, that should be solid and accurate sources of information, if you find that competition between those two sources of information is so stark, the difference between what side A and side B says is so different, then do the most important thing ever in identifying agendas: follow the money. Oh, trust me, if there's an agenda, it's because there's money involved. Money is not the root of all evil, but the love of money is. Let me say that again. Money is not the root of all evil. The love of money is the root of all evil. That's one of those tiny little elements that many people have said, well, this is a fact. This is the truth. Money is the root of all evil. That's why we hate capitalism. That's not what the phrase says. And it's not proven to be true over long periods of time. Money also feeds hungry children. Money also provides medicine for the sick. Money also provides transportation for those who want to go to work. Money does a lot of good things, and our society wouldn't operate well without it, without the exchange of goods. And the more free and open the exchange of goods, the better we are. So money is not the root of all evil, but the love of money is. See that little dichotomy? The truth, the manipulated truth, the real truth, and the misinformation leading around it? Money is not the root of all evil. The love of money is. If you're a leader, you've got to be able to get down to the nitty-gritty just like that. You've got to be able to discern the agenda from the truth. And if you're a leader, you're responsible not only for finding that truth, but then successfully communicating it to those that you lead. They're counting on you. They need you to do your homework, not to buy into the agenda, not to become a part of the agenda for sure, but to find the truth and communicate it well. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.